Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in the Clown Decade. The decades where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And if you want an insider's perspective of the civil service, the cabinet office, the entirety of government as to exactly why things are getting worse before they get better, please take a look at the stream we did on the Wellington Project yesterday, where we went through Dominic Cummings' blogs and his plans for the future, where he clearly has had success in actually making changes within the system that improve things, but ultimately it goes into detail as to why things are pretty bad, why we are continuing to see them get worse, and exactly where we need to focus our attention. You will find the link to it in the description below. Anyway, why are things getting worse, particularly this time? Well, the Tories have been putting out an awful lot of good rhetoric about immigration over the past year or so, but it's all come hurtling and crashing down. It's all a massive embarrassment. Well, what exactly did we expect when Lord Cameron was put into the Foreign Office? Well, there was chat on taking a look at these student visas and either trying to reduce them or take away their ability to bring dependents along with them. Well, Rishi Sunak backtracks plan to restrict graduate visas after cabinet opposition. Ministers argued for radical crackdown on visas would be damaging for universities and the UK economy, because you have to realise what the UK economy basically is a massive amalgamation of a housing market with an NHS attached to it. And what the universities actually do for the UK economy is effectively make an absolutely massive market for people looking for very temporary housing, and that is a 3-year rolling stock. Most people go to university for 3 years, and for 2 of those years they're going to be looking for temporary accommodation to rent, because in the first year typically they'll be in student halls. And so I imagine that was part of the worry for having less and less students come over from foreign countries. There is also the obvious scam of universities allowing foreign people into universities because they are effectively cash cows, giving student fees that are 3 to 5 times larger than your standard student from Britain. This is also another reason that they are preferred over British students. Plans for a radical crackdown on graduate visas that allow overseas students to work in the UK for up to 2 years after graduation look set to be abandoned by the Prime Minister after coming up against staunch opposition from the Cabinet colleagues. Rishi Sunak has been considering restricting and even scrapping the graduate visa route as a way of reducing migration figures, but he is now expected to opt for more modest reforms to close loopholes and prevent abuse of the immigration system. Among these measures under consideration is a clampdown on recruitment agents that market British degree courses overseas, with penalties for those who fail to supply the type of students they promise, according to Financial Times. Foreign students who use the graduate visa route to stay in the UK at the end of their studies could face mandatory English tests, according to The Sun, which also reports that universities and colleges with high dropout rates could lose their licence to recruit overseas. It's kind of crazy that all this stuff isn't just standard procedure anyway. You need an English test to I'm sorry, but this is how ridiculous it is. They can come over for a student visa without knowing any English, coming to an English university. How the hell are they learning anything if they don't know English at English universities? And then secondly, to actually get on the graduate visa route, i.e. to stay after they have finished their studies and stay in Britain to work, they need to take an English language test, as if that shouldn't be the case in the first place. But the marketing of British degree courses overseas, yes, that should absolutely be clamped down on, because all it really is for a way for some students to effectively get a free degree. Well, it's not free. It's free in terms of they don't have to do all the work that everyone else does to get onto the degree course, because they're paying £30,000 for the 3 years to do that degree course, while getting Ds in their A-levels or equivalent. Point being that there were plans to reduce the number of student visas and graduate visas that we would be giving out, thus reducing the amount of immigrants we would be getting, and now some of that is being U-turned on, as Sunak backed away from more radical proposals to restrict the visa offer after interventions by the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary David Cameron, the Home Secretary James Cleverly, and the Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, who all argued it would be damaging for universities and the economy. And as far as I care, it's fine to damage universities. Many of them should absolutely not be classified as universities. because they're all polytechnics that are mainly there to effectively get all the bonuses that universities do, and all they are incentivized to do is fill up their courses and get as many courses on board as possible because it gets them more money. And this is part of the reason we're seeing so many woke subjects, because the professors in these departments are saying, oh, you know what, we need an entire feminist department so that we can have all these different courses to offer people, and then that's going to get us more money. It's direct incentives between both the government and universities. This is effectively why woke has taken over the entirety of the university system. And as usual, to define it, woke means intersectional or radically progressive politics being pushed, in this case, in university degrees. An announcement on the proposed reforms is expected to coincide with publication on Thursday of the Office for National Statistics quarterly net migration figures, which always underestimates how many migrants have actually come over, because their way of finding that out is simply by going to airports and asking people who are arriving here whether they're coming to stay or coming for any other reason. Indian students and alumni in the UK were among those urging Sunak to retain graduate visas and reject claims that they are little more than Deliveroo visas that allow overseas students access to low-paid jobs in the gig economy. Just so you know, India's graduate unemployment rate is 29%, so if just under a third of India's graduates can't find a job in India, then yeah, that's their incentive for saying, please let us come over to Britain. Anyway, David Cameron, no limit on English-speaking international students. Foreign Secretary says message should go out loud and clear, while Braverman accuses universities of selling immigration, not education. And once again, I find myself in complete agreement with Suella Braverman. There is no limit to the number of English-speaking students who can come over to the UK, Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton has said, as a former universities minister warning that visa restrictions left higher education more reliant on China. The Foreign Secretary told the House of Lords on Tuesday that Britain has an incredibly clear offer to international students around the world. He said if you have an English language qualification and a place at British University, there's no limit on the numbers that can come. And while we have the important debate in this House about the rules we should put in place, that message now needs to go out loud and clear to every country. And so this is where we're up to with the immigration debate. Rishi Sunak constantly says, yes, we'll get immigration under control, while he hired a foreign secretary that says it's basically unlimited, at least when it comes to university. And again, as I mentioned before, I've done a video on it, but there is an entire scam going on in British universities, especially in Russell groups, where they are more incentivised to take on foreign students because they rake in more of the cash. And to encourage that as well, foreign students don't need to work as hard in school to get those places. And given student visas make up a large portion of the visas we give out, apparently David Cameron is insistent on making that even larger, despite the fact that when he was Prime Minister and leader of the opposition, he was constantly promising tight controls on immigration, bringing it down to tens of thousands. Apparently, the whole time, it meant no limit. Last week, the Migration Advisory Committee said in a report that the graduate visa route should not be changed. The government's team of independent advisors found no evidence that the scheme was being abused, because that's what they were looking for. Cameron had already written to Rishi Sunak warning that universities will face job losses and closures if he curbs graduate visas, and highlighting the significant economic contributions the international students make to the economy. Again, basically just putting more pressure on housing in university towns. He opposes hardline restrictions on graduate visas, along with Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, and James Cleverly, the Home Secretary. Yes, we have basically an entire cabinet of people that are practically refusing to take these issues seriously. Professor Brian Bell, chairman of the MAC, said that limits on students bringing dependents with them had already had a bigger impact than expected on the number of international students coming to the UK, so there was no need for further restrictions. Well, I suppose we'll have to wait for the immigration numbers to come out from the ONS on Thursday. So yes, some things are being done, but as I say, not nearly enough for my liking, and I don't think that's going to be improved anytime soon. Anyway, on to illegal immigration, and France and Belgium failed to stop half of migrants crossing Channel. Of the 16,372 who attempted to reach the UK during the first 4 months of the year, only 8,805 were stopped, new EU figures show. Which I suppose at least we're getting something for the millions of pounds we're sending over the Channel to France to stop them, but the fact of the matter is it is not a long-term solution. As Dominic Cummings says in his blogs, we are an island, and there have been much more radical things done to curb invasions like this in the past. And yes, invasion is a perfectly legitimate word to use, no matter how little violence they are doing to get here. If there are people coming over illegally for no justifiable reason, they are invaders, and we are justified in stopping them. Luckily, this is a slight increase from the 42% interception rate recorded by the French before Britain and France signed a £480 million deal in March 2023 to boost beach patrols and extra surveillance equipment. So that's about £16 million per percentage point. Not exactly what I'd call the greatest value for money, but whatever. The total number of migrants attempting to cross fell over the course of last year, and we're down 36% on 2022. However, this year the numbers of crossings and attempts have risen again to record levels, exceeding those during the previous record-breaking year of 2022, when a record 45,000 migrants crossed. Almost 10,000 migrants have successfully arrived so far this year, a 37% increase compared to this time last year. So I see that the Rwanda policy is really working out for you. But as we say, we're an island. Any serious government would be able to effectively end the channel crossings overnight, but we simply don't have the political will to actually overturn the civil service's death grip on just allowing these people over. And obviously the forces within there are constantly pushing against any sort of solution to this problem, because their solution is effectively to just say, why don't we make these crossings legal instead? Because that is about how serious our government is at the moment. Anyway, you might be asking, so, they've got the Rwanda deal and more people seem to be crossing the channel. We've given £500 million over to Europe to help them try and intercept and stop boats crossing while they're still in European waters. How's that going? I guess okay, there's a slight improvement. What's the next thing we should do? Well, the Prime Minister announced new funding to stop the boats, and he will meet with Austrian Chancellor Nehammer in Vienna today to discuss illegal migration. And just as a quick aside, Austria was endorsing the Rwanda scheme and called Britain pioneering in its attempts to actually get the Rwanda deal off the ground. We've not actually sent anyone over yet, but clearly other countries are seeing the merit to sending illegal migrants to a safe third country. Which again, if it can work, I have absolutely no problems whatsoever with it. But as I say, we have an entire civil service that is taking the government to court because they're saying they're making us break the law. Break laws that Parliament created, by the way. Anyway, this meeting comes as an additional £25 million is given to the National Crime Agency to sustain and scale up these efforts to disrupt people smugglers and their operations. The government doubled the funding available to the National Crime Agency in 2023 to prevent the supply of boats and engines. This has successfully hit criminal gangs' profits. Okay, it's not stopped them, has it? After 12... It's hit their profits. They don't care, they're just sending more people over. After 12 months of dedicated operations, small boat engine costs have increased by nearly 5 times their price in March 2023, and critically the cost of crossing the channel has risen by 4 times from its low in 2023. Right, guess what they're going to do instead? They're going to put more people on the dinghies instead. Great. And then you're going to have international incidents where boats capsize because there are too many people on, and we get blamed for it for not being compassionate enough or something. Man, how are we going to stop these criminal gangs that don't really care about the law? We'll hit them in their pockets. Wow, that is giving them such bad incentives, I don't even know where to start. This is just classic departmental bloat, by the way. Constantly we're being told, oh, more's being done to stop illegal migration, and then what, as I say, what's happened in 2024? We've literally had another record broken by the amount of people crossing the channel. 2023 looked like a bit of a white pill. Oh, look, it's starting to go down now. Nope, 2024 comes along despite all of this money put into it, despite all of the efforts put into Rwanda. It's basically not made a dent in the stopping of the small boats coming to a goddamn island. And it doesn't help that half of the people in Britain seem to think that there is some genuine cases of refugees of people coming from France to Britain. People in France need to escape France to come to Britain because they don't feel safe there. No. Complete and utter nonsense. We should have absolutely no tolerance for this, but we're tolerating it for a 4th year running. Thank God we stopped illegal migrants coming over on the back of lorries, but Even when there's choppy days, they're still managing that. And despite all this, I still have no idea who to vote for. Though this is the schizophrenic question I always ask myself, because I'm fully aware that Parliament has very limited power when it comes to these decisions. As I say, the civil service is literally taking the government to court over the Rwanda scheme. The people that are supposed to be implementing government policy are taking the government to court over their policy, despite the fact that is them that make the laws. How have we ended up in this position? As I say, if you want a little bit of white pilling on this whole situation of if government has no power, what the hell do we do? Watch the stream from last night, because there are based allies within the civil service. They just have to keep quiet. There are plenty of people all over Britain who know that this is all nonsense, but they have no opportunity to actually get into government and actually help with any of it, because CCHQ won't allow them to be Tory MPs. Every other party is frankly a joke. But Dominic Cummings is coming up with plans to try and launch yet another alternative political party. Don't get me wrong, I know how that sounds. However, this is a man who has been within it all, quite frankly. He knows how the whole system works, he knows where we can target, and best of all, he knows how to win over the public. You know, this man was against Goliath in terms of the media structure, the entirety of the government superstructure, and yet he still won a vote. And not only did he win a vote to decide we are going to have Brexit, he also managed to get Brexit done a few years later, despite literally everyone in government wanting it overturned. The man is worthy of listening to. He is probably the best person we should be listening to about this entire issue. And yet he's practically been sat on and almost half ignored, and I am certainly in that camp of people who have ignored him and absolutely shouldn't have. He's much more worth listening to than Liz Truss, despite my soft spot for Liz Truss. Anyway, I think right now you should go and watch that stream, because it's about 2.5 hours long, but it is very good and very informative, and might give you a better white pill than I am able to give you in any of these videos, so please go and watch it. But for now, that was everything I had for you today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.